Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace one single powerful metaphor through Scripture to really get our heads around the theological concept of the internal struggle against sin. So here's how we'll break it down. We'll start with what the text calls the cursed ground. Basically, where did this all begin? Then we'll see how that creates a war within, which in turn produces the fruit of desire. From there, we'll explore the only way out of this predicament, and it all comes down to a final point of choice. Okay, let's dive right in. To understand any of this, we have to go way back to the beginning, to the very source of this internal conflict. The source material kicks off right here with a curse. But what's really interesting is the specific target. The curse isn't placed directly on the person. It's placed on the ground because of them. You know, the very raw material that humanity was made from. That's a crucial detail. Now, this isn't just about forming suddenly becoming a tough job. This establishes the core metaphor for everything that follows. Think about it. If the raw material itself is cursed, if it's prone to producing thorns and thistles, then anything made from that material is going to carry that same flawed nature. So let's move on and see how this external curse on the actual ground translates into an internal reality. This is where we get into the conflict that happens inside every single one of us. The Apostle Paul, writing in the book of Romans, describes something that, well, it just feels deeply human, doesn't it? This incredibly frustrating disconnect between what we want to do and what we actually do. We know what's right, but we really struggle to pull it off. And he really paints a picture of a full-on civil war here. He says one part of him, his inner being, delights in God's law, but another part, his body, his members, is literally waging war against his mind, trying to take him prisoner. It's this constant tug of war. And here is where it all clicks together. According to the text, our very own flesh is the new cursed ground. That original curse on the soil has become the internal landscape, the battlefield where this constant struggle takes place. So if our flesh is like this cursed ground, what does it naturally grow? This next part explores the inevitable result of this internal war when it's just left to its own devices. The book of James lays out this really clear and, let's be honest, pretty grim progression. It starts with an internal desire. That desire then conceives and gives birth to an action, which is sin. And then, when that sin is fully mature, it leads to a fatal outcome. It's a chain reaction. And Jesus, as quoted in Matthew, really drives this point home. He lists all these things like evil thoughts, theft, slander, and makes it clear that the problem isn't external, it's internal. These are the thorns and thistles that the text says grow naturally from the uncultivated ground of the human heart. So this brings us to what feels like a pretty hopeless situation. I mean, if our very nature is compromised, what can we even do? Well, let's get to the turning point and see how the source material presents a solution. You can just feel the desperation in this cry from the text. It's that moment of total surrender, that admission of, I can't fix this myself. I can't win this war on my own. It's a recognition that the rescue has to come from the outside. And here is the answer that's proposed. The solution, according to these texts, is not to just try harder. It's not about more willpower. It's about a divine intervention. Something external has to be introduced to this internal cursed soil to actually change what it produces. And this gives us a completely different picture from the harvest of the heart we saw before. The text in Galatians presents this alternative harvest: love, joy, peace, kindness, an entirely new kind of fruit. And it can grow on the exact same ground, but only if a new seed, the Spirit, is planted there. But, and this is a big but, the solution is not automatic. The final part of our explainer really focuses on the active, ongoing role a person has to play in all of this. So what this means is that the presence of the Spirit introduces a real choice. A person can either keep following their natural, default inclinations, or they can consciously choose to submit to the Spirit's leading, which is what empowers them to overcome that default state. According to this whole theological framework, there is only one way for a person to overcome that inherent tendency towards sin and actually fulfill God's commands from the heart, and that's through divine grace and their active submission to the Spirit. So what does this actually look like day to day? Well, this is the core takeaway. The struggle doesn't just disappear. The metaphor of working the ground continues.
It's like being a gardener. You have to constantly tend to your fields because the ground's natural tendency to produce weeds never ever goes away.
And the metaphor holds true right to the very end. This choice isn't a one-and-done event. It's a daily, ongoing process of cultivation. It means actively fighting the weeds of the flesh while intentionally nurturing the fruit of the Spirit. The ultimate harvest you get depends entirely on which one you tend.
So the ground of the heart stays the same. The real question is about which harvest is going to get tended. And that's the central idea right there. A problem rooted in creation, a war fought inside our own bodies, and a daily choice that determines the final outcome. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.